When the newly built two-family house was finally completed, my mother-in-law said to me bluntly, "You're no longer needed, so please leave. We actually didn't prepare a room for you." While I pretended to be surprised, my husband had already presented the divorce papers. "Look, the divorce papers." "Happy? I will get this house in the property division." He looked at me with satisfaction, and I maintained my composure while accepting the divorce papers with a smile. I'm finally free. Pretending not to know anything for so long was really exhausting. My husband was taken aback when he saw me answer in such a relaxed manner. "What?" I decided to reveal the truth to my oblivious husband. "My name is Dolores. I'm 32 years old and a company employee. Ever since getting married, we lived in a rented house, dreaming of one day having our own home. We were supposed to save together to build the house, but my husband, Stephen, was reluctant to invest his own money. My parents are financially struggling, so I'm supporting them. I'll help with savings when things settle down." I couldn't argue with him when he used supporting his parents as an excuse. Stephen was self-employed in the transportation business, and because his income was unstable, he never disclosed to me how much he was earning. While he boasted that his income was higher than mine, he hardly contributed to our living expenses. Stephen's parents, whom we live very close by and who receive his support, often came to visit. Stephen's sister also lived in his parents' home, and as she worked from home, she frequently showed up with them. Although his father was already retired and living off his pension, thanks to his working sister, they didn't seem to be struggling financially as much as he claimed. His travel-loving parents often went on trips, and I had been curious about where their travel funds came from. Moreover, during the times his parents were traveling, his sister often came to our house to eat, which has been a source of concern. "I was too busy today to prepare a decent meal, so I'll eat here," his sister would say, waiting for me to come home. Although it was convenient because our homes are close, it was troublesome that she wanted to have dinner at our house almost every night, and she was waiting for me the following day as well. When I prepared dinner for Stephen's sister, she openly showed her dissatisfaction. "This is the same dish as yesterday. I was hoping for something different. I want to eat steak," she said. Her complaints about the meal I had prepared amidst my busy schedule made me angry. Despite her dissatisfaction, Stephen's sister finished all the food and left, expecting a special feast the next day. That day, when Stephen returned home, I exploded in anger at him. "Your sister came for dinner again today, complaining while demanding that I serve steak or prepare extravagant meals. Why do I have to take care of her dinner?" As I spoke with anger, Stephen responded as if it was none of his business. "Don't tell me, tell her directly. Where she eats is not my concern." His response only intensified my anger. I was disappointed once again to realize that appealing to Stephen, who was weak against his family, was pointless. Realizing that Stephen had no genuine intention to build a new home, preferring his family over our life together, my heart sank. Around that time, I received a call from my brother saying that our father had been rushed to the hospital. My father, still an active company employee, had collapsed during work. "The situation is quite serious, so be prepared," my brother said gravely. "Since our mother passed away, I thought my father was healthy, and the news almost brought me to tears." As I was distraught, my brother asked, "Is Stephen busy?" "At times like this, I wish he would support you, Dolores," he said. Even when I tried to contact my husband, I only received cold responses, making me feel even more alone. "I'm too busy right now and can't leave." Besides, rushing there won't improve your father's condition," said my husband, not offering support even in an emergency. Although my father barely survived, he was still in a critical condition. From the next day, I started visiting the hospital to check on my father after work. This made me return home late, and my mother-in-law spitefully said, "From tomorrow, we will also have dinner here, so come back early. The nurses will take care of your father in the hospital, so there's no need for you to do so much." Although Stephen's sister had dined at our house before, his parents had never made a special effort to come for a meal. It seemed like my mother-in-law deliberately said they would dine at our house because she disliked that I was visiting my father, and this upset me. "Why do you need to have dinner at our house? Isn't it inconvenient for you to come here?" I retorted, trying to contain my anger, but my mother-in-law expressed more anger. "Stephen said we should eat here, so I'm coming reluctantly. If there's a problem, talk to him," she snapped. Even though I couldn't believe that Stephen would say such a thing, when I asked him about it upon his return home, he looked troubled. "Mom said that? If Mom says so, I must obey. So it's settled that you will prepare our dinners from now on," he said, seemingly dissatisfied but unable to oppose his mother's commands. As a result, I became responsible for preparing meals for my in-laws. Disappointed by my husband's attitude of prioritizing his mother's instructions, I began to question our future relationship. When his parents dined at our house, it meant that his sister would join them as well. Therefore, I had to prepare meals for 3 additional people. However, I was certain that my in-laws would complain about the food I made, which weighed heavily on my mind. I was fed up with having to prepare under these circumstances. After making dinner, I decided to visit my father and try to avoid seeing my in-laws as much as possible. As expected, my mother-in-law made a spiteful comment. "Don't you want to be with us? Going to the hospital won't cure his illness, will it?" As I was heading to the hospital and ignored her complaint, my sister-in-law laughed and said, "Dolores's father apparently has quite a fortune, so she must be thinking she'll get a big inheritance by visiting him." Leaving them to their assumptions, I left the house. Since my father was hospitalized, my mother-in-law had deliberately left dinner preparations to me, and her indifferent attitude towards my father's health condition irritated me. As my sister-in-law heard through Stephen, my father was indeed wealthy, and the family did own real estate. I didn't care about the inheritance. All I wanted was for my father to recover. Nevertheless, my father eventually passed away, and I was devastated by his death. "We'll handle the funeral preparations, Dolores, so you can stay by Dad's side," my brother and his wife told me, and they arranged everything. I'm grateful that my sister-in-law handled things so efficiently, yet my husband didn't show his face even once. When I informed Stephen over the phone about my father's death, his reaction was unbelievable. "I don't care what happens to your father. What about dinner?" Stephen blurted out. I was speechless at my husband's concern for dinner preparations. Stephen yelled, "Come back home quickly," and hung up the phone. In the end, Stephen did not appear at my father's funeral, and my brother and his wife were displeased with his attitude. How disrespectful of him not to show up at his father-in-law's funeral. He never visited once. What did he really think of Dad? My brother expressed his indignation, and I regretted marrying Stephen. After the funeral, when I returned home, Stephen was inexplicably smiling. "Dolores, what did you inherit? I heard your father had a lot of real estate." He asked about my father's real estate without attending the funeral, and I glared at him angrily. "That's none of your business, is it? And why didn't you come to the funeral?" I demanded. "I hate funerals, they're such a hassle." but I'd like to know the details of the inheritance," he replied almost gleefully. I told him I inherited nothing, although I hadn't discussed it with my brother yet, and I didn't fully know the extent of my father's assets. Stephen doubted my words and continued to ask persistently about the inheritance. When I continued to ignore him, he couldn't stand it and apparently called my brother. Stephen called me, yelling to hurry up the inheritance division. "But is he really that desperate for money?" my brother said. Hearing this, I felt embarrassed and apologized for my husband's actions. "I'm sorry. Stephen is only thinking about the inheritance. Please don't worry about my share," I told my brother over the phone, feeling guilty as I heard his concerned voice. My brother seemed suspicious of Stephen's abnormal interest in the inheritance. My brother and I decided to exclude Stephen from the discussions about my father's real estate, and we calmly agreed on the inheritance distribution. Having lost trust in Stephen, my brother informed me of his future plans, and I agreed to follow his directions. When Stephen later learned that the inheritance had been finalized, he made a big fuss. "Dolores, what did you inherit? Don't hide anything. Tell me everything," Stephen yelled, and his mother overheard. "If you've inherited the house, share some with me too." "I'd prefer a new house if possible," his mother demanded. Similarly interested in my inheritance, Stephen's sister cheerfully stated her wish. "I'd prefer cash. I want to buy a nice and luxurious apartment with it." As my in-laws built up their convenient fantasies, I calmly presented the facts. In reality, all I inherited is a vacant lot. Indeed, I did inherit some cash, but why should I have to give it to you? Disappointed by the lack of a new house, Stephen's mother and his sister frowned upon being refused the cash. Upon learning about the land and cash inheritance, Stephen suddenly suggested cheerfully, "Let's build a new house on that land. A duplex would be great. Wouldn't it be wonderful for us all to live together?" Stephen's mother and sister were delighted with his suggestion, and I responded as my brother had instructed. "Understood. Let's build a duplex on the land I inherited," I readily agreed, and Stephen's mother and sister smiled in satisfaction, but his father seemed to realize something and asked, "Dolores, are you sure about this decision? You realize this means you'll be living with us?" His usually reserved father seemed surprisingly sharp this time. "Just be quiet. It was because of your low income that we couldn't build a house," Stephen's mother snapped, and his father fell silent as usual. Since the decision to build the duplex, Stephen started coming home late, saying he was busy and his parents stopped showing up at the house as often. Now, I painfully felt the spitefulness of Stephen's mother and sister, who had demanded dinner preparations during my father's hospitalization. When Stephen's mother and sister tried to decide the layout of the duplex on their own, I firmly refused. "I will decide since I am providing the land and funds. We'll go with a standard layout, so rest assured." I skillfully avoided a situation where Stephen's mother and sister would have created a strangely structured house by deciding on the layout themselves. I explained to the disgruntled in-laws that while we would share the entrance, the living areas would be separate, to which Stephen's mother sarcastically retorted, "I'd rather not live with you, Dolores. Dividing the living spaces is better for us." Apparently they were displeased that I was leading the layout planning. Hearing their words, I responded in a low voice, "Don't worry, we won't be living together." My quiet voice wasn't heard by my mother-in-law, but my sister-in-law seemed puzzled and asked me for confirmation. "Did you just say something? Like we won't be living together or don't worry?" When I quickly denied saying anything, my sister-in-law accepted it immediately. As the floor plan was finalized and the construction of the house began, My in-laws were almost daily visitors at the construction site, looking forward to its completion. My sister-in-law, who works from home, often accompanied her mother, seemingly shifting her work hours to the night. As the completion of the duplex approached, Stephen and my in-laws started shopping for new furniture and appliances. New houses need new furniture. Since it's your house, Dolores, could you provide the funds for the furniture and appliances? Stephen suggested, trying to also make me pay for these. I responded apologetically while pretending to be sorry. I'm sorry, but my funds are depleted, so I'd appreciate it if you could handle the furniture and appliance purchases. While Stephen looked perplexed, surprisingly, my mother-in-law supported me. Stephen, arrange for the furniture yourself. Dolores has already done enough by building the duplex. It was hard to suppress my laughter at this unexpected support. Looking forward to life in the new house, Stephen and my in-laws purchased a large amount of furniture and appliances, apparently financing much of it with debt. Close to the completion of the duplex, when we visited the site as a family, my mother and sister-in-law began to boast about the furniture and appliances they had bought. "Are you sure it's okay to borrow so much?" "I definitely can't repay it with my pension," my father-in-law asked anxiously. Unconcerned by his worries, my mother and sister-in-law were optimistic, expecting him to help with the payments. "Stephen has been very busy lately and comes home late, but we can repay the debt soon enough. You should help out a bit too." My mother-in-law told my sister-in-law. Suddenly asked to contribute to the repayment, my sister-in-law hastily retorted, "What? I can't afford that. Stephen has to work harder. His job is going well, so there's no need to worry." Listening to the conversation between my in-laws and sister-in-law, I could barely contain my laughter. If my husband's job was going well, he could have made purchases with cash without having to resort to loans. In fact, until recently I did not know, but it seems that neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law knew the exact amount of my husband's income. "Please do not bring in furniture and appliances without permission. There are procedures required," I explained, and my mother-in-law visibly showed her displeasure, but my sister-in-law responded meaningfully. "It's the house we will be living in, so we can just wait a bit longer." At her words, my mother-in-law smirked, and I pretended not to notice anything. When the duplex was completed and we were inspecting it, my mother-in-law maliciously said to me, "You're no longer needed, so please leave. We actually didn't prepare a room for you." While I pretended to be surprised, my husband had already presented the divorce papers. "Look, the divorce papers. Happy? I will get this house in the property division." He looked at me with satisfaction, and I maintained my composure while accepting the divorce papers with a smile. Then my sister-in-law spoke disdainfully. "Stephen is remarrying, so there's no room for you, Dolores." They looked at me as if they had triumphed, but I returned their gaze with a smile. "I'm finally free." Pretending not to know anything for so long was really exhausting, I said, and my husband's expression changed to one of shock. "Why are you acting so carefree?" "You're being thrown out and losing the house," he said. I responded disdainfully. Divorcing someone who only makes $9,000 a year and who has been proven to be unfaithful couldn't make me happier. It seems that my husband still didn't comprehend the situation, but my mother and sister-in-law began to panic. "Wait, $9,000 a year? That's not monthly, is it?" my mother-in-law exclaimed, and the smile disappeared from my sister-in-law's face. Just then, my brother arrived, and I calmly revealed the truth. I found out about Stephen's affair quickly because my brother had it investigated. I could have divorced sooner, but I decided to enjoy a little revenge because of how terrible you've been," I explained. As I was explaining, my husband tried to deny the affair, but when my brother presented the investigation report, he fell silent. My sister-in-law was aware of my husband's plans to remarry, so the entire family knew about the affair. As my husband's infidelity became evident and he appeared dismayed, my mother-in-law shot me a harsh look. "Even if Stephen cheated, if a divorce is decided, there needs to be a division of property, right? Therefore, this house belongs to Stephen," she asserted. Against her convenient interpretation, I clarified the facts. The land this house is built on was inherited from my father, and therefore it is excluded from the division of property. The funds for constructing this house were also entirely from my inheritance, and the house is registered only in my name. Thus, it is not subject to property division. If I had used the inherited funds for daily expenses, or if my husband had contributed financially to the building of the house, then it might have been considered for property division. However, that was not the case here. Despite my explanation, my mother-in-law was not convinced. Stephen and my sister-in-law, realizing they would not receive the house, were clearly unsettled. "Why didn't you tell me that I wouldn't get the house even after the divorce? I had promised my girl a life in a new home," Stephen exclaimed in anger. Watching this, my sister-in-law murmured in shock. "Not being able to move into a new house. I've already bought the furniture, and now it's all wasted." Upon learning that Stephen's annual income was only $9,000, my sister-in-law became even more concerned about the repayment of debts. Stephen, also worried about debt repayment, discreetly sought confirmation from his sister. "Mom said that since your income is stable, repaying the debt shouldn't be a problem, right?" he asked. My sister-in-law turned pale and just shook her head silently. Facing the pressure of debts, I declared calmly to my husband, "Given the fact that you committed adultery, I'm preparing to claim a division of property. I will also hold your affair partner responsible." Faced with the reality of a property division claim, my husband tried to retract the divorce and attempted to snatch the divorce papers from me. At that moment, my brother intervened, stopping my husband, and sternly stated, "It is shameful to talk about canceling the divorce after having an affair. We've already started the process for a claim for damages through a lawyer, so you better be prepared." Finally, understanding the seriousness of the situation, my husband collapsed, powerless. Meanwhile, rather than worrying about my husband's divorce, my mother and sister-in-law were preoccupied with their own debts and suddenly began to prostrate themselves before me. "Dolores, please help us. You're the only one we can rely on," my mother-in-law begged as she rubbed her head on the floor. I responded calmly, "We are now strangers to each other, and there is no chance of getting the loaned money back, is there?" When I responded, my mother and sister-in-law were at a loss for words. Everything had gone according to plan, so as my brother and I were about to leave, my usually reticent father-in-law suddenly spoke up. "I'm getting a divorce as well. I've always followed your mother's commands, but I can't stand it anymore," he said angrily and left the new house. Stephen and my sister-in-law, who didn't earn much, found it difficult to repay the debts, and it seemed everyone was hoping for my father-in-law's pension. It appears that my father-in-law had finally decided to free himself from my mother-in-law's control. As we looked on, my husband and his family panicked and followed my father-in-law out of the house. Watching them leave, I felt a sense of relief, and my brother was smiling contentedly. When I said we were building a new house, Stephen and the others acted just as expected. The revenge on everyone was also thanks to you, brother. I expressed my gratitude, and my brother smiled modestly. It was actually his plan. Afterward, I filed the divorce papers and demanded property division from my husband and his affair partner. My father-in-law eventually divorced my mother-in-law and left the family home. My ex-husband ended up moving back in. After I left the house I used to live in, my ex-husband was unable to pay for living expenses or rent and had to return to his mother's house. At the in-laws' house, they were just managing with my ex-husband and sister-in-law's meager incomes and my ex-mother-in-law's pension, barely making ends meet and unable to afford debt repayments. My ex-husband was burdened with monthly payments, his debts kept increasing, and he was even abandoned by his affair partner. The affair partner, due to financial instability, gave up on marrying my ex-husband, and my ex-mother-in-law had sought support for living expenses and debt repayment, making my ex-husband's situation even tougher. It's natural to dislike living with such a noisy mother and sister-in-law. From the start, I planned to rent out the duplex, and I had already arranged with a real estate agency, with tenants already lined up. I decided to utilize the precious land and funds inherited from my father, starting a new life in a one-room apartment, but with rental income from the duplex. I was living a stable life. Sometimes when I visit my brother and his wife, they ask about the possibility of me remarrying. Since I've failed once, I'm not thinking about marriage for a while. I don't want to go through that trouble again. I responded, and while my brother understood, his wife optimistically suggested, "Don't worry. Next time I'll find someone wonderful for you. Your Father in heaven would be worried to see you alone," she proposed brightly. Moved by her words, I find myself looking forward to a wonderful introduction. Knowing my brother's wife to be a trustworthy person, I'm sure she will make a good choice. While I showed a reserved attitude on the outside, deep down, I was excited about whom I might meet next.
How long have we been discussing this topic? Don't get carried away, or it's divorce. I doubt my husband really meant that. Tomorrow, as his mother is set to be discharged from her treatment, my husband keeps pushing the idea of her moving in with us. I have absolutely no interest in living together, have opposed it in the past, and have no intention of changing my mind in the future. After all, how well does he even understand the numerous discussions we've had about his mother? If he truly remembered, he wouldn't be forcing this living arrangement. Frustrated, I hung up the phone. I am Kathy Brown, and I will be 52 this year. Last fall, our daughter Nicole got married and moved out to start her own life. Since then, it's been just Eric and me. Eric and I met nearly 30 years ago through a mutual friend, and we were married 2 years later. Both of us have our careers. Eric works for a company, and I'm a civil servant. Both Eric, a company employee, and I, a civil servant, have continued working to eventually save up to buy our own home and travel the world after retirement. His family is from a rural area and engaged in farming and has strong traditional values where women quit their jobs upon marriage to become housewives, and the eldest son is expected to take over the family home. This is something my in-laws often emphasized. Hearing these outdated views from them, I even hesitated to marry. But unbound by such values, Eric always reassured me, saying, "Don't worry." Since his sister and her husband were set to take over his family home, we felt secure to continue our careers, build our home, and dream of a new life together. After marriage, we shared household duties and enjoyed our days together. Eric's parents never visited our home, and my parents did not interfere. On weekends, we often traveled or relaxed at home, cherishing our time together. About 2 years into our marriage, I experienced pregnancy. My parents who lived nearby regularly checked in and supported me daily, allowing me to give birth in this area without having to return home. Our family was blessed with a lovely baby girl. With the birth of a newborn followed many traditional customs. The first significant one was the baptism. When I asked my in-laws to stay for this occasion, the response was sarcastic. "So the baby truly has come into the world. Since you didn't come to visit, I almost thought she didn't exist." Besides, planning the baptism during the most hectic time of the year, that's quite the hassle. After giving birth, traveling long distances was difficult, and we didn't plan to meet Eric's family until the beginning of the next year, though we had sent them several photos in the meantime. Despite knowing I wasn't making this up, I was deeply hurt by my mother-in-law's cold reaction. Postpartum is already a mentally unstable time. When I discussed this with Eric, he comforted me, saying, "Don't worry. It's just that she couldn't express her feelings honestly. She just wanted to meet the baby sooner. Seeing how cute Nicole is, she'll surely apologize." During the baptism, my previously stern mother-in-law was visibly delighted the moment she held the newborn. It seems the loneliness of not meeting her due to my parents taking care of the baby had made her a bit jealous. That day, both sets of parents spent time amicably, and I felt satisfied. While I was standing a bit further away and watching everyone, my mother-in-law quietly approached. "Thank you so much for today. You must be tired from the long journey. How did you find the baby? I think she looks like Eric. Girls often resemble their fathers, don't they?" I said with a smile. However, the smile on my mother-in-law's face vanished. Her complexion changed immediately, and she showed a slightly angry expression. "It was a long journey to come here. Usually, it's the man's family you should visit, right? And a daughter-in-law who gives birth to a girl is looked down upon. Hurry up and have a boy." "Having a girl is embarrassing to even mention," she said harshly. I couldn't hide my shock at her words. Just being born healthy is a miracle, regardless of gender. It's unreasonable to dismiss the fact that the grandchild is a girl and even demand a boy next. "What are you saying? Nicole is perfectly healthy and adorable, resembling Eric. Gender isn't an issue." I couldn't remain silent. Nicole was wrapped in a cute white dress, looking absolutely adorable. I might be biased, but even neighbors and friends say she's very cute and they're excited to see what her future holds. Having a male child is very important. A boy is seen as the heir to the family. "You wanted a girl? It's a daughter-in-law's duty to have a boy," she stated without any sign of remorse. As I was about to argue back, I heard Nicole's cry from afar and Eric came to call me. Though I was filled with anger and had a lot to say, hearing Nicole's voice calmed me a bit, and I thanked her before leaving. Her harsh words were hard to forget. Seeing my beloved daughter treated coldly just because of her gender, I pushed my mother-in-law to the back of my mind and focused on raising my daughter with love and support from Eric and my parents. Naturally, a distance grew between me and my mother-in-law, and since Eric's family home was far, we rarely visited, only making it a yearly tradition to visit during Christmas. As Nicole grew less dependent, roles within the household shifted. The household chores at Eric's family home became my responsibility. Especially during Christmas, there was frequent interaction with the locals. I had to prepare drinks, alcohol, and meals depending on the time for many guests. Naturally, cleaning up was also my responsibility, and I spent most days busy without much rest. Despite this, my mother-in-law told visiting people, "She is incompetent, only able to produce one girl. She's a failure for not having a boy." Eric and I had hoped for about 3 children, but after Nicole, there were no more pregnancies. Though we had decided to let nature take its course. Being blamed as if I had intentionally only had a girl pained my heart deeply. Exhausted by my mother-in-law's attitude and disheartened in the kitchen, my sister-in-law came in and comforted me. "Don't mind her. She's always like this. We have a boy, and you shouldn't worry." I actually wanted a girl too. "I'm envious," my sister-in-law said. She has 2 sons who are close in age to Nicole, and they always play well together. My sister-in-law married a local childhood friend, and because he was the second son and the older brother had moved to the city, she took over the family home. Her casual support helped me get through these days. "Thank you, really. It reassures me to hear you say that. I might be biased, but Nicole is very cute. I'm glad she's a girl, I said as her children came running up. She said, "Sorry to leave the household chores to you. I'm going to check on the kids," and left the room. Soon after, my mother-in-law entered and shouted, "This is no time to rest. Hurry up and clean up. We need to prepare for the next guests." Useless daughter-in-law, maybe it's because you were raised in the city. Filled with utter frustration at her words, I encouraged myself to endure just a bit longer and proceeded to the guest room. My daughter eventually grew up and got married. Her husband is a junior at my workplace, a calm and capable young man. I am confident that he will take good care of my daughter. Every time I look at the empty room after Nicole moved out, I feel a sense of loneliness, but she keeps in touch with us regularly through social media. We often visited Nicole's home and spent quality time with her husband. Sometimes my parents joined us, and those were truly happy times. One day, Eric said, "My mom has fallen and been taken to the hospital. I'll go to my parents' house for a while." There was no warning the day before, so this news was surprising. I asked him why, and it turned out that Eric had been secretly communicating daily with his mother via social media without my knowledge for nearly 30 years. I was dumbfounded by the revelation that my husband had kept this from me for so long. However, even after being treated coldly, it's natural to be worried upon hearing that his mother was injured. Despite my doubts about Eric's ongoing communication with his mother, I was concerned about her condition. Hoping her injuries were minor, I worried all day and left work early to return home. Eric hadn't returned yet, so I watched TV and had a simple dinner while waiting for his call. My phone rang after a while and Eric said, "Hello, Kathy, it's me. Mom's okay, so don't worry. She's staying in the hospital tonight just to be safe, but she hasn't broken anything. She's expected to be discharged tomorrow. But there's something I need to discuss." I was relieved to hear his mother was safe, but his next words took me by surprise. It turns out she's been badly treated by my sister and brother-in-law, so I've decided to bring her here to live with us after she's discharged. Dad will continue to live there, he explained. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Even though I understood that his mother would be moving in with us, it was too much for me to accept emotionally. Caught off guard by this sudden proposal, I responded, "What do you mean? Wasn't your mother supposed to continue living there?" This sudden suggestion of living together is troubling. We had agreed not to live together originally. From the beginning of our marriage, we had agreed not to live together, and Eric knew this. Moreover, his sister had assured us, "Don't worry, we will take care of this house and our parents." I was shocked by the sudden proposal, feeling like the ground was slipping beneath me. However, she has been receiving harsh words from my sister for a long time. This is abuse. It's the first time I've seen Mom so worn out. I can't bring her back to that house. Since Nicole's room is available, it would be best for her to move there, Eric insisted. Eric seemed unwilling to budge, but remembering the harsh treatment I had received in the past, I couldn't accept living together. Indeed, Nicole's room was available, but it still contained her belongings, and it was intended for her to use when she and her husband visited. That room was supposed to be available for Nicole when she visits. It's simply not possible to have your mother move in. I have work, and you do too, Eric. We can't leave your mother alone during the day, I strongly argued back. It was impractical to leave his mother alone in our house during the day. Look at the reality. I can't just send my troubled mother back. I've saved up some paid leave to take care of her for a while. I'll try not to burden you, Eric said. He was prepared for long-term care, but eventually, he would have to return to work. At that point, the responsibility of caregiving would likely fall to me. Nicole had just married, and I was looking forward to finding new hobbies and enjoying myself, but those plans were crumbling. Furthermore, given the treatment at Eric's family home, it's clear that living at our house would not be fulfilling. The daily chores like cleaning, laundry, and cooking would require more effort than ever, and I would need to accompany her to the store and doctor's visits. Considering this situation, living together was unrealistic. Eric, it's impossible for you to take a long leave, and what will we do if something happens when we are not here? The worries about adapting to a new environment were endless. If my father-in-law decided to continue living at their original home, in effect, they would be living separately. Stop fussing. I'm even considering early retirement. The company has offered an increase in severance pay for early retirees. So, I plan to quit and take care of my mother, Eric asserted. I was shocked by his sudden decision and disappointed by the shallowness of his plans. We had initially planned to work until the age of 65 together. Wait a minute. Don't make decisions on your own without discussing it. I can't accept unreasonable demands. Why not send your mother back to her home and wait until things stabilize there? Living together is impossible. Have you forgotten the conditions we agreed upon before getting married? I protested. We couldn't have a calm conversation. Eric and I were both trembling with anger. How long have we been discussing this topic? I've decided. I've already told the company that I'll be using up my paid leave. I've also finished consulting about early retirement during that time. Always opposing me. I didn't think you were such a cold person. Don't get carried away, or it's divorce, Eric shouted. Although I was surprised by his remark, I wouldn't regret leaving the house if we couldn't live together. If his mother was coming, perhaps separation was also an option. I decided to think about divorce later. Fine. If you choose your mother, then I'm leaving, I declared and ended the call. Once my decision was made, I acted quickly. I had intended to think it over thoroughly, but once I made up my mind, I downloaded the divorce papers and filled out what I could. I left them conspicuously on the living room table. I packed my bags, informed Nicole about the recent events, and asked to stay at her place until I found a new one. Nicole kindly responded, "Stay as long as you need, and if necessary, I'll come to pick you up with the car." I packed all my belongings into bags and left the divorce papers clearly visible. It was sad to leave behind the furniture, appliances, and dishes I loved, but I had limited luggage I could carry and had to move out quickly, so I had no choice. I expressed my gratitude to Nicole and her spouse, borrowed a room to store my belongings, and we talked about the events of the night until late. The next day around noon, when I turned my smartphone back on, I unexpectedly found numerous missed calls. Upon checking them, I saw they were all from Eric, which confused me as it felt like monitoring. Just then, my phone rang again. "Why did you leave the house? And why are the divorce papers on the table? My mom says she's hungry. Can you make her something to eat?" Had Eric forgotten our conversation from the previous night? Not even noticing the divorce papers, only worrying about his mother's meal. What kind of nerve was that? I told you yesterday, we're getting divorced. I can't deal with your unreasonable demands anymore. I'll hand over the shared bank account information, and I'm letting go of the house and all our belongings. I want to avoid disputes over asset division and compensation. Make sure you file the divorce papers, I said and ended the call. Right after ending the call, my phone rang again. "Don't call anymore. I'm at work right now." I briefly refused and set my phone to block his calls. I felt more disgust than sadness toward such a disgraceful husband. I never thought divorce would feel this easy. I had expected to be sadder and more depressed, but surprisingly, I felt refreshed. Perhaps my dissatisfaction with my husband was deeper than I thought. After a while, I might settle down and be overwhelmed by loneliness. Anyway, I was determined to move forward without looking back, but Nicole's offer to take your time, let's live together, moved me, and as a result, I continued living at my daughter's home. 2 months after leaving the house, my ex-husband contacted Nicole's home. "Nicole, is your mom there? I need to talk to her for a bit. Could you call her for me?" Nicole sensed something was wrong and handed the phone to me, saying, "Dad seems to be in a serious situation." 2 months had passed, and I wondered why there was such urgency. "Good evening. It's been a while. How have you been?" I greeted him, and he replied immediately. "Hey, Kathy. I got a sudden call today saying the mortgage payment was missed. What's going on?" The payment should have already been made from our joint account. We pay the electricity bill from that account too, right? They told me that if it's delayed further, they might seize the property. During our marriage, all living expenses were paid from that joint account. This included the mortgage, utilities, food expenses, and credit card payments. We each deposited $1,500 per month into that account, totaling $3,000 every month. Thanks to this, we had some financial flexibility, and our savings had gradually increased. However, after the divorce, I stopped all deposits, so I'm not aware of the current account status. It's hard for me to say what to do. I don't know the balance of the joint account anymore. I haven't made any deposits since the divorce. Unless you have been wasting money, there shouldn't be a reason for it to run out so quickly. There was a sudden gasp from the other end of the phone. It seemed he had just realized that the balance was dangerously low because I had stopped transferring money and he had quit his job. His mother staying over also probably led to additional expenses like buying new furniture and eating out frequently, which caused a considerable amount in expenditure. To tell you the truth, the divorce hasn't been finalized yet. I still have the divorce papers with me. I can't stand your selfish behavior anymore. Please come back home. If you return, even Mom will forgive you, he said. I couldn't believe the divorce wasn't finalized yet. His behavior, as if I should forgive everything, infuriated me. Eric and his mother might be able to forgive, but I can't and won't put up with it. He was still talking, but Eric's words didn't register with me. I still love you, and we were happy when we were together. You still have feelings for me, he claimed, stating things contrary to the facts. It doesn't matter what the situation is over there. I want a divorce and consider it already finalized. You should get along well with your mother. Handle any financial worries between yourselves, I made it clear. Even if they were struggling with money and a place to live, that was no longer my problem. Understood? Then, I'm going to Nicole's house with Mom right now. We'll sit down and resolve this, he said angrily and hung up. I immediately contacted Nicole and her husband to explain the situation. They promised to handle it calmly. I felt embarrassed and sorry for causing trouble for my daughter and her husband. Nicole's husband reassured me, "Don't worry. Please, take it easy." Eventually, Eric and his mother arrived. "It's been a while, Kathy. Why aren't you taking care of your husband's parents?" "It's not right for Eric to struggle," she said without greeting Nicole and her husband. "Grandma, good evening. It's not just Mom here. I'm here too. Please stop getting angry without even properly greeting first. This is my house, so please follow our rules," Nicole responded firmly. This was the first time I saw my daughter stand up so assertively. The little girl who once needed protection had grown into a confident, independent adult. "Grandma, Dad, please come this way. I'll show you to the living room," Nicole said, taking the lead like a teacher managing a classroom. "Everyone, please take a seat. First of all, Grandma, what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be living with your daughter?" Nicole began to take charge. My mother-in-law muttered in a low voice, "Acting all high and mighty at such a young age? Who do you think you are? So, what's the matter? Dad, why did you suddenly bring Grandma here?" Eric quietly replied, "Well, because she's my mom." I yelled so loudly and no one is answering me. What's going on? "Kathy, do you have anything to say?" Disappointed with Eric and his mother, who were hesitant to speak clearly, they started talking to me. "I do have something to say. Eric, I used to deposit $1,500 into our joint account every month. If you didn't live extravagantly, that should have been enough for a while. If it ran out, you could use your retirement funds or savings, no? Also, Mother, I'm not just a maid. You can't just use me however you want." Once I started talking, I couldn't stop. I hadn't realized until now just how deep my grievances with Eric were. Eric himself, not expecting me to speak so frankly, stood there with his mouth agape in surprise. His mother was shaking with anger over my unexpected remarks. "If you give up that apartment, you could get a significant amount of money. Eric manages it, so I'll leave the decision to him. Just be careful about changing the deed because it might incur a gift tax. Also, please manage the property tax by yourselves. Mother, if you can move around, you should at least do some housework. Why did you leave your home anyway? I couldn't help wanting to know why she had left. She had been living there for so long, with her husband, daughter-in-law, and even her proud grandsons. Yet she suddenly left, and I didn't understand why. Please stop raising your voice. My daughter has been harsh on me. It feels like she's bullying an old woman. I couldn't feel at ease at home, and when I fell, no one cared, she said pitifully. I felt nauseated at this sight. Just then. Stop saying such shameful things. Just stop. You've always been so selfish, Mom. I can't believe it. Lying and seeking sympathy won't work. You should just give up and go back home, came the voice of Eric's sister from my smartphone. We had been on a speakerphone call with her. My sister-in-law, unable to bear her mother's words, had spoken up. She was direct and rational, saying things without reservation, which must have been hard for my mother-in-law to endure. On the other hand, her son spoiled his mother, quickly forgiving her at the slightest tear. You were always so harsh. Eric is kind and always cares about me. It's just this incompetent wife complaining. We are living happily here, his mother retorted. Essentially, she had fled here to escape conflicts with her daughter. It's all so ridiculous. Eric being dragged into such problems was due to his naivety and dependency on his mother. It seems Eric is waiting for you at home. Lucky you. We plan to sell this residence as well, so it would be ideal for you and Eric to go back home after clearing up. Since Eric quit his job, he has time on his hands. Helping with farm work back home would be best for him, I said to them, smiling brightly. They looked at me seriously. As they gazed at me, I pulled out a document. Eric, this time I will make sure the divorce papers are filed. If you delay, the division of assets will be firmly decided through a lawyer. I won't ask for compensation, but the division of assets is inevitable. What shall we do? With a look that felt like checkmate, I gave them a cold stare. I wanted to make a decision today. Eric sighed and finally signed the divorce papers. His mother continued to shout, "Heartless woman. Horrible wife abusing the elderly. Grandma, this is my last request. Don't forget how you always treated Mom harshly just because she had a girl and neglected me while giving toys and sweets to Aunt's sons. You never even gave me a single candy. Now that this talk is over, I want to say goodbye. Please leave this room quickly. I don't want to see you ever again, and you won't see your great-grandchildren," Nicole said tearfully but strongly. For a long time, I had been consumed by my own emotions, but learning how my daughter had been mistreated by her grandmother, I felt angry. My daughter's words are everything. Mother, please do not come here ever again. Eric, this is the end for us too. If I have to contact you about anything, I'll call Tracy, I said. Rejected by both me and Nicole, Eric and his mother left dejectedly. As the solution became clear, I felt relieved speaking with Nicole, her husband, and my sister-in-law over the phone, grateful for their support, and looked forward to filing the divorce papers tomorrow. It had taken some time since that phone call, but everything had finally been resolved. After selling the house, my ex-husband and his mother returned to their hometown. The farm work kept them very busy, and my sister-in-law was pleased to have additional help. Physical labor was a challenge for my indoorsy ex-husband. My mother-in-law did simple tasks in the garden and household chores. They would learn the value of hard work through these difficult tasks. This seemed suitable for them. Meanwhile, as I felt awkward living long-term at my daughter's house, I moved to a nearby apartment. I planned to help my busy daughter as much as possible. Nicole was pregnant and expected to give birth in 6 months. I would become a grandmother, and as long as the baby was healthy, the gender didn't matter to me. Every day, I eagerly awaited seeing my grandchild's face as I walked firmly on my own feet.